we all go through life in three different kinds of ship, right? We have the sinking ship, right? We're in this ship only for survival, right? You're only in this for survival. And then we have the cruise ship. The cruise ship is all about enjoyment, right? If life is all, let's have fun and, that's all there is to it. And then there's the battleship. The battleship is mission oriented. It has focus. It takes risks. And there's a little bit more. It's laser focused. So we've got to identify what kind of ship you want to be in. If everybody...
Staying motivated takes work. If you don't work on your motivation, you become unmotivated. Join Umar Jang as he shares inspirational stories and tips to get you motivated to do whatever you need to do. This is the Motivational Voice Podcast.
Hi everyone, welcome to the Motivational Voice Podcast. This is session number 29. It's good to be with you once again to bring you some motivation and positivity in your day. When was the last time that you did something that truly brought you joy? And I mean just you and not with a bunch of other people, just you doing something that really makes you happy. If you answer, well, gosh, I don't know, it's been a while, then I encourage you to make time to do just that. Life is too short to put off some of those small joys. By the way, I want to hear from you. I want to know what types of episodes, what types of stories you want to hear on the podcast. I put together a brief 2-minute survey that I would love for you to use to tell me what you think, to tell me what you like, what you don't like about the podcast. And if you do fill out the survey, please send me a message and let me know that you did that so I can give you a shout out on the show. Thank you very much in advance for doing that. And I will put the link to the survey in the show notes of this episode. All right, let's get down to business. My guest today is Fred Gatty. Fred is a thought leader in human potential with a passion for helping people sculpt life strategies that expand their imagination of what's possible. He focuses on the fundamentals of human behavior that affect personal and business performance, challenging mindsets and paradigms that hold them back. He joins me today to share tips on how to overcome limiting beliefs we may have picked up from our past experiences or our upbringing. This is a very interesting take on how some of the behaviors that we have vis-a-vis certain things in life may be stopping us from living the life we want. Let's listen to my interview with Fred. All right, Fred, thank you and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Umar, for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, likewise. It's a pleasure to flip the script on you. I know that normally you're the one behind the microphone asking the questions.
It feels good to be on the other side for a change. So
right, definitely. So, who is Fred, and what do you do?
Very great question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. I get to ask people a lot, but I think it's interesting for me to have to answer who Fred is. I describe myself, Omar, as a thought leader, and my mission is to help challenge the mindsets and paradigms that hold people back. I have a full-time job, but my what brings me satisfaction really is just anything to do with my calling, right? So I'm a podcaster, as you already know. I'm an up-and-coming author of the book Believe, Dare, Become. I'm a life coach, I'm a trainer, and I'm a speaker, but everything I do really is geared towards helping people discover who they are and helping them overcome some of the challenges that they've been through in life.
Yeah, so I know we will definitely talk a little bit about the book towards the end of the podcast, but that should be exciting to be writing a book. How is that process going?
Oh gosh, this book has been in the works for the past 7 years. I started it, but the timing had never been perfect. Along the line, life happened. I had to put it on hold to complete my graduate school and all the competing priorities with work, with the new job and all of that. And I felt like this year, with everything else going on, was a year that it had to happen. I also had the opportunity to interview some guests on my podcast whose stories made it into the book as well. So it's been a fun experience. I think I'm at a point where I feel very confident that the timing of this book is perfect to meet the needs of the world today. So looking forward to it coming out sometime in the fall.
That's great. Yeah, it always seems that the timing is never right, and I generally talk about that. Where whenever you want to do something, there's always something else that kind of gets in the way, and I don't know if that's behavioral or if it's just nature, life's way of getting in the way.
I think it's just life. We're always going to have reasons and excuses not to do something, but I think that's really where the intentionality comes in. It's really just life. You have a good reason to do something, you're going to have 10 other reasons why you shouldn't do it. So.
And you mentioned, we'll actually dig a little deeper on that. You mentioned earlier that, so you talk about mindset and paradigms, how behaviors can affect our personal and professional lives. Can you talk a little bit about that? What are some of those behaviors that generally get in our way?
That's a great question, Omar. I think a lot of the behaviors stem from our own experiences, different experiences in life, right? So it's whether it's through an event, a catastrophic event, or some of the cultural and social constructs that we grew up with, or things that we've been told, or just our personal learned behaviors, right? Mindsets and belief system. There is a story that I always share that illustrates some of these behaviors and how inhibiting they can be. It's a story you've probably heard about when elephants are trained for circus events. When the baby elephant is discovered or it's identified, they tie this rope or it's tethered to a tree or pole where it's not allowed to move, right? And so this elephant goes through this process for however long the trainers think it should. And so this every time, of course, it tries to make a move, it's tied to that pole, and so it can't move. And so along the way or over time, this elephant somehow believes that it's not meant to move, right? It's that its whole life is tethered to that tree. Even when that elephant is released, when that chain is unshackled, because it's so used to how it's lived its life tethered to that particular tree, it takes a lot of effort for it to actually realize that it's free, right? And so a lot of us go through life, and whether our experiences are shaped by, whatever we go through, belief systems or things that we've been told, we buy into that so much that it takes a lot of effort to be able to come unglued, all right, to change those behaviors. And so if these are behaviors that stop us from becoming all that we want to be in life, then that becomes more problematic, right? It takes a lot more effort to unglue or unlearn or challenge some of those paradigms and constructs, which is really what I've committed my life to helping other people overcome.
That's interesting, because that the elephant being tethered is in a way a metaphor of things that can hold us back in our lives, and in some cases it may be psychological or it may be emotional, but we may not even realize it, because if you lived in a town and that's all you know, and you don't know that on the other side of the town there's the ocean, really, how do you become aware of those limitations and those behaviors?
I think in life, Omar, you've got to learn to push the boundaries, right? The fact that something does not mean that it's always going to be the same, right? So that's what we have to try to overcome that. I'm a storyteller, so please indulge me here. There is a story that I heard about a man who, during the gold rush many, many years ago, was determined to go find gold. So he left his home country in Williamsburg, Maryland, all the way to Colorado to go dig up gold. And so he found a shovel, and then he started to dig, and then he came across what he thought was a little bit of gold. He was so elated, he covered that up, went back, rented tools, brought his family together to help him. And so they came with all the tools and they started digging, and then they found gold. So they started digging, and they got to a point where seemed like was the end of it. And so he gave up, sold the tools, went back with his family, and then sold everything to a junk man. This is a true story, by the way. This junk man bought the tools, and then came back to this exact same spot where this man and his family were digging gold, and decided to give up. And he hired an engineer to come assess that environment, to tell them exactly what they needed to do. Lo and behold, this engineer came and realized that they were 3 feet short of discovering what would have been the biggest discovery ever. 3 feet. But because somehow they had tapped out or run out of ideas, or didn't seem to think beyond that immediate environment, they gave up entirely. And this engineer, with the help of this engineer, this junk man discovered what was worth many, many, many hundreds of millions of gold, only because he decided to tap into someone else's expertise. So we get to that point, Omar, where we're stuck, and maybe all we need is someone else's expertise, a different perspective, to help us go beyond our own environment, beyond our construct, beyond our beliefs, to be able to get to where we want to get to. That's where I think a lot of these behaviors get us into trouble, because in our own mind, we don't see anything past where we are, right? So we have these limitations, but if we could only get past that limitation, whether it be a mentor or a book or a counselor or a life coach or whoever who we can enlist to help us get behind or beyond those immediate environments, a lot of us will find ourselves in great places in life. That's where the behavior change comes into play.
Yeah, no, that's very powerful, and I love stories too. I mean, certainly. By the way, it's a good way to bring your points and make them clear. I know some of us are more open to change, or more open to trying new things, whereas others may not be so much. For those of us who, maybe someone who's listening and thinking, yeah, I want to try new things, I want to push myself, but it never really works out in my favor. I'd rather just stick to what I know works. I have what I have, and that's enough for me. What would you say to those kind of people?
It comes down to personal choice, Omar. You can't really force someone beyond where they feel they want to be, right? They have to have that desire. Desire is the beginning of everything. If I want to get from point A to point B, I have to have that desire. If that desire is not there, desire is not something you teach. I mean, you can talk to me until I'm blue, until you're blue in the face. If that desire or that willingness, right, to take that step is not there, we teach change management and all of that, but that's why a lot of organizations struggle with change management, because it's a mindset. It's a cultural shift that has to take place. But to help people change, you have to help them see the big picture. If they don't see the big picture, it's not going to get them anywhere. So if someone is saying, look, this is how it's always been done, I'm okay with it, that's their mindset, right? But until you help them see differently, here is why I think you need to be able to see differently. Here's why life is better this way. Here is why taking this step could lead you down that path. Until that ability to understand is kindled or rekindled in the mind of whoever is looking at it, it becomes a losing battle. And that's why organizations spend a lot of money, hundreds of thousands of dollars, trying to foster a change environment. But what I think they fail to do is helping people understand. If they know the why, or if they understand why, then they throw themselves behind it. But if that desire is not there, if I don't see any immediate benefit, if all I'm seeing is this is life, this is how I will, if I'm not able to change that mindset to see things differently, then I'm stuck. So how bad do you want it, right? If I want another job, but then because every time I send an application out, I get a rejection letter, so I become comfortable, the desire has to be strong enough to keep me going, right? If the desire is not strong enough, I stay where I'm at, and I think this is all there is to be, and I resign my life to live in this way. It's really all about desire.
And does this mean for those who may be in an environment where they are surrounded by people that necessarily don't have the same mentality or the same ambitions, if you will, that hold them back? In a situation like that, what would they have to do to overcome, really, to break away from that mentality of, what I have is good enough, and I'm not looking to change because change is too hard?
That's a great question. you have to have your own goals, right? You have to have your own destination, right? And again, another metaphor that I actually heard about this today, that we all go through life in three different kinds of ship, right? We have the sinking ship, right? We're in this ship only for survival, right? You're only in this for survival. And then we have the cruise ship. The cruise ship is all about enjoyment, right? If life is all, let's have fun, and, that's all there is to it. And then there's the battleship. The battleship is mission oriented. It has focus. It takes risks. And there's a little bit more. It's laser focused. So we've got to identify what kind of ship you want to be in. If everybody else is in that sinking ship, but I want to be in that battleship, I have to realize the cost of breaking away from or jumping from that sinking ship into that battleship, right? So it comes down to having a definite net of purpose. A lot of these thought leaders, Napoleon Hill, Thomas Edison, and all these other guys, Jim Rohn, it comes down to definite net of purpose. You have to know exactly what you want. If I know exactly what I want, I'm able to take that risk and not allow myself to be stuck just because everybody else is in this boat, right? And it becomes difficult because you seem like the outsider. You're called names, you're called all sorts of things because you're trying to defect. It's about the blue crab story, right? The crab that tries to get out of the bucket is a crab that gets killed because everyone else is comfortable with that status quo. You have to become uncomfortable with the comfortable in order to be able to make that change that you want.
Yeah, no, that's a very interesting take on this. Getting out of your comfort zone and pushing your boundaries. What are some other things that people can do to break away from these fundamental behaviors that hold us back?
It all starts in the mind, right? You have to have goals. You have to know where you're going in life. There's a saying that if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, right? It's like Alice in Wonderland. Alice comes to the crossroads, and she asks the Cheshire Cat, where do I go? The cat tells Alice, it all depends on where you want to go in life. Alice says, well, it really doesn't matter where. And the cat says, if that's the case, then any road will take you there, right? You have to know where you're going. Again, it comes down to having that desire. Desire is not something that I can't create in you. You have to want it that bad to be able to commit to taking those steps, right? So having that goal is important. Where do you see yourself 5, 10, 20 years from now, right? And then committing yourself with those type of affirmations, how or what are you going to do to get you to where you want to get to, right? And so there's a lot of work, that goes into it. It's not just, thinking or wishing. We can all wish for what we want, right? But desire, you decide exactly what you want to do. And the second step is to act. If my desire, Omar, is to get to, travel from here, to California, the desire is there. I have to act on it. What do I need to do to get myself on the road? Am I going to drive for however many hours it's going to take me? Am I going to book a flight? Act on it, right? So that's the second step. The third step is to reinforce ourselves. And this is where a lot of us miss it, because we decide to do something, we run into obstacles, and we give up completely because, it's too hard, or you try a first time, a second time, a third time, and you fail. People who get to where they are today are people who've tried. How many times haven't we heard people like Colonel Saunders who tried over 1,000 times to sell that chicken recipe, and now we have KFC, right? How many times haven't we had Thomas Edison try over 1,000 times to invent the light bulb? What if they're giving up after 50 or 60 or 70 or 80 or 120 times? We wouldn't be where we are today, right? It takes that persistence. It takes that desire. After you get knocked down, you get back up. And that's where it's difficult, because some of those experiences are not pleasant. Life hits you back in the face, you fall down, maybe you lose your job, you lose a loved one. And these are real situations or life events that stop a lot of people from getting back up. That's what we have to guard against, those types of things. Yes, adversity is going to come. Cry, mourn, do whatever you need to do. But after that, you've got to get back up. And the last step is to evolve. Life is all about learning. You make a mistake, you don't stop there. What did I learn from here? What lessons can I take from here to get me back to where I want. I call this the DARE principle, right? DARE. You decide where you want to go, you act on it, you reinforce, and then you evolve. It's a process. You can't allow the fact that something happens to you today or tomorrow to stop you. That's really what life is all about. If it was rosy, we wouldn't have all the problems we have today. But it's really about committing yourself, and putting yourself through the mill to get you where you want to get to in life.
Oh, that's a very good advice. Now, you coach people. You are a life coach, as you mentioned. Are there certain things that certain, maybe it's trends or certain behaviors that you see more often in people than not?
One of the things that I see a lot, Umar, is about motivating yourself, right? Finding the need to keep going. One of the questions I ask people a lot during coaching sessions is what wakes you up in the morning? What gets you going, right? And we hear different things, it's family, it's I want to make a difference in life. So finding that ability to motivate that yourself. That's why a lot of people need coaches, right? Because if they could do it for themselves, then they wouldn't need coaches, right? So the ability to motivate yourself. And that's what we do. When we're coaching, we don't tell people what to do. We ask questions. Right. So why are you in this position? What do you think you can do better? What are some of the options? What can you learn from this? And so it's helping them uncover, or discover some of the answers within them. That's really what coaching is all. It's not about telling, because most people know what's wrong with them, right? It's they know it. It's just that they need the help to be able to get out of that. And so what motivates them is really one of the big things that I think a lot of coaches or life coaches have to deal with. That's one of the trends that I see, or a theme really across board.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that, because sometimes I have people come to me and they want me to tell them what to do. I was on a discovery call with a potential client, and she wanted me to tell her what to do in a certain situation. Whereas I think you're right. There's a misunderstanding between, you have all the answers within you. As a coach, we can guide you to find the right answers and do the right things, but we're not in the business of telling you what to do. In that case, it's kind of like we stop teaching you how to fish, that example. In that case, we're just giving you a fish. And if we go away, then you don't know how to feed yourself all of a sudden.
Exactly.
Right. So that's a good point that you brought up. Yeah. Are there any applications from a business standpoint? Now, we talked about how this can affect the person on a personal level and in our lives. What about the business side? Is the application the same, or is it different?
These can be applied across board. The same DARE thing, right? So for an organization, maybe dealing with change, for instance, you can apply the same DARE principle. It's that desire, right? Or it's that deciding on where an organization wants to get to, right? So maybe it's to increase revenue by maybe 20, 30%, whatever, or to maybe reduce attrition in a particular department, or to improve morale. Identifying that goal is critical. Again, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there, right? So it's really coming up with that objective or that strategic statement, that mission statement, whatever it is, I think is key. And then committing yourself to it. And this is where you're getting everybody else on that bandwagon, right? Getting the employees to see why the need for change. Oftentimes, in my experience, they come up with, here's where we're going, and you find resistance. People don't want to, get on board. It's because they don't understand why. If you're telling me that the reason I have to, be at work at a certain time is really to help, one, ensure that the customers who are waiting on the phone get the help that they need, and it doesn't result in bad service. Now I see why. But if you don't tell me why, they're just micromanaging me. They just want. So helping people understand the why, I think, is huge. So if corporations in their change efforts or change initiatives can spend some more time on the why, once they know the why, once you can get the people's buy-in or your employees buy-in, they'll throw their weight behind everything that you do. And then also to reinforce yourself, right? There are going to be changes. A lot of organizations, Umar, that started this year had no idea that they would have the employees working from home. I'm sure a lot of them had plans, events and things like that in the workplace
Yeah.
and all of that. No one knew that, 4 months into the year or 5 months into the year, a lot of businesses will be shut down. Life throws companies curveballs, right? But the companies that are able to adapt are the ones that end up, in better places. So again, this is not the end of it. There are going to be a lot of changes and things like that. What can we learn? How can we think ahead? How can we be flexible, malleable to make sure that we're riding the waves? No one knows what's going to happen. And then to evolve. You're not going to get it right the first time, right? You're going to make mistakes and things like that. But what can we learn out of this to ensure that if this happens again, we can become better? Leaders, a lot of leaders haven't dealt with managing through crisis like this before, right? It's new to a lot of people. But again, I think vulnerability, being willing to learn from our mistakes, listening to your employees, listening to feedback, and then going through this together, right? I think is one way that organizations can get ahead.
What is the cost of not, and this could be an emotional cost or any type of other cost, that of not really practicing this? So from a personal level, what will it cost me to not understand these behaviors that set me back or hold me back as a person?
If I understand you correctly, what is the cost of not being willing to change?
Right, basically, yeah.
Who knows, right? I mean, it's really hard, and that's why companies like Kodak and Blockbuster and other companies aren't here today, right? Sometimes it's the experience that's the best teacher, people say, but I don't believe so. I think learning from other people's experiences is the best teacher, because you may not be able to come out of that experience alive and whole, right? So if it's happened to one organization or if it's happened to someone else, what is it that you can learn? Umar, that's why we have books. That's why we have all those books. There are a lot of experiences in there that people have put in those books that I don't want to go through, right? I want to read those books and understand and learn some of their lessons so I can apply them to my life, right? Because sometimes the cost, like you rightly said, can be painful. There is no guarantee that you may be able to come out of that alive or sane. That's why I'm a reader. That's why I like to read. That's what we're doing, what we are today. So if someone is listening, there's a lot that can be learned, right? There are good podcasts out there like yours and books and things like that. Learn from other people's mistake, because the cost, while we can't exactly predict exactly what that would be, some of these costs are just irrecoverable.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I think there's a call to action there for personal development if you are an individual, and for companies to be willing to change, to be adaptable, to be willing to really, I guess, be nimble, because you're right, to your point, we've seen so many companies go under because they were rigid. I mean, the biggest example in the US is, we all remember Blockbuster Video, right?
Yeah.
We thought they would never go under.
Yeah.
But, I think we're down to one Blockbuster in the United States that's left standing now.
Yeah. I was asking my kids the other day whether they knew what a Walkman or a Discman was. They had no idea. They had no idea. My wife, who is a teacher, an elementary school teacher, was sharing a joke with me. They had this boombox in their classroom, and I guess they play CDs or whatever. And one of the 4-year-olds, I guess, went to the boombox and was trying to talk to it. Alexa, play so and so music. Right?
It's like, no, Alexa,
they have no idea. They have no idea what a boombox is. So that's we say this and we laugh at it, but that's how fast things are changing. You can't not afford to adapt. The cost is too high.
No, that's a good point, because if you were born even sometime after 2000, you don't know any other world where there's no smartphone, no color TV, no internet, high speed and fiber optics.
Yeah, that's Generation Z, right? I think that's what they're called now. Z.
Yeah, Gen Z. Gen Z is the Gen Z. There's they're the teenagers now / college students.
Yeah.
But and it's not that it's their fault. It's just the world changes.
Exactly.
And you have to be willing to change along with it.
Yeah.
And that's a very, very good point. And it's funny because literally earlier before at around lunchtime today, my son was asking me, he asked me a question. He said, would you be willing to go back to the past with the knowledge that you have today of technology and be able to take a picture with your phone? I said, well, the days of dial-up were not fun.
Mm.
You sit there and wait for a picture to load for half an hour. That wasn't fun.
It's convenience, right? I mean, if I'm hot in the middle of the night and I'm feeling lazy, I can just pull out the thermostat on my phone and adjust
Right.
the temperature, right? Or I can tell Alexa, turn on the TV, or all of that, right? So it's, of course, there are bad sides, there are always the downsides to all of that, but no, I'd rather stick with some of the convenience, really. It makes life a whole lot easier.
Yeah,
Sure.
absolutely.
Yeah.
It certainly does. What motivates you?
What motivates me is the ability to motivate other people. I know this is weird, but nothing is satisfying to me, Omar, than to be able to make an impact in the life of other people. Right? It's a reciprocal thing. That's really the joy. So if it's something that I say, or it's a word that I say that inspires someone to do something better, that benefits them, is what inspires me. So my waking moments, all the learning, all the reading that I do is, how do I give back, right? Is it about a post, or is it about something that I share? Is it about a discussion that I have, or something that helps someone become better? Is really, and I guess that's really why I do what I do, because my goal is to really help other people to become better. So what motivates me is to see other people become motivated.
Good motivation, certainly. Where you can spend an hour with someone and literally have them have an aha moment that goes on to change their lives.
And for them to come back and say, Fred, or Omar, what you said was so timely. I needed to hear that. That's what I needed to hear, especially now. That's the best feeling ever. That's the best. Nothing trumps that at all.
Yeah. And we talked about this a little bit. You have a podcast, and what made you start that podcast?
It's really just to have a different platform to reach more people. I started with this as a guest, actually. A friend of mine had invited me to be a guest on their radio show. And so I went as a guest. And by the time I walked out of that radio show, I was asked if I was willing to become a host. And this was sometime towards the end of 2019. And so I started with this local radio station here in Richmond, Virginia, January 2nd, right? So I'd go in, and then, I'd have people come into the studio, people call in, and we'll talk about various topics, overcoming adversity and all of that. And then COVID happened, and then we couldn't go into the studio anymore. And so I figured, well, what other ways could it be? Could I start a podcast? And so that really led me to finding other ways to reaching people if I couldn't go back into the radio station. And so I got a host posting platform, and I called it Time with Fred, and it's been the best thing ever. Now I don't even go back to the radio station. I tape everything here, and I send them copies. And so that's really how the Time with Fred podcast was birthed. But about 5 or 6 years ago, I had this idea, Omar, of having a program. I think it was a desire to have like a TV show, a radio show called Time with Fred. So even before this opportunity came for me to do this work at the radio station, I had it written down, Time with Fred. It wasn't a podcast then, it was just Time with Fred. And I had no idea what form it was going to take. And so when these guys asked me to be a host, to think about it, to come up with plan, I told them, look, I have it ready. I have a name and everything. Just within that hour, we had a meeting, we had the discussion, and then this whole thing was birthed. So preparation, you don't wait for the opportunity to come. When opportunity comes, it's too late to prepare. So I'm always preparing. I'm like 5, 6, 10 years down the road, knowing exactly where I want to be. That's not to mean that I'm rigid in life, but I have a clear-cut goal. So when the opportunity presents itself, I'm ready to walk in.
No, I think it's the opposite. You're right. I think it's interesting how sometimes our psyche will manifest something that we are going to do in the future.
Yeah.
Sometimes decades ahead. Before we even know it, we know. So our psyche, our mind, subconscious knows.
It's the power of the subconscious.
Right.
It's the power of the subconscious, right? Or the law of attraction, as people like to call it.
Yeah, that's amazing. I think now you are working on a book, and I believe the working title is "Believe, Dare, Become." Is that right?
Yep.
Right. And what is the book about?
Just like the title says, right? What we believe and dare influence what we become in life. That's really the subtitle. And it's, our thoughts. The believe are, comprise, our thoughts, what we believe, our social constructs or cultural constructs or paradigms. So our mindset about certain things, right, then determines how we act. If I believe that it is going to rain, for instance, maybe a lame example here. If I believe or somehow have a premonition that it's going to rain, then I go out with a raincoat or an umbrella or something. It determines how I act, right?
Yeah.
Or there's a feeling that something bad is going to happen. You got to prepare, right? If I believe I'm going to be a host of the Time with Fred podcast, I got to have a plan, the name and how it's going to. So it's influencing my actions, which then influence what becomes of me today, a podcaster, right? Years ago, I had this belief, I had this idea that I was going to be a host of some type of program. It wasn't even a podcast back then. It didn't even occur to me, but it led me to take certain actions. I had to have a plan, right? So that belief or that idea or that thought influenced the actions that I took, which is now made me, that podcaster. So it could go either way, whether negative or positive. There are people who have feared or have great fear that something bad is going to happen to them. And it happened. James Allen wrote a wonderful book called As a Man Thinketh, right? Our beliefs, it's all about what we believe. If you believe something bad is going to happen to you, the greatest fear is to fear itself, right? If there's anything to fear. So if your life is governed around fear, this thing is going to happen to me. It's going to cause you to act a certain way, and eventually the law of attraction is going to manifest itself. So the book was written really to help people challenge, again, the mindsets and paradigms. And there are 13 chapters comprising 13 different questions. The very first one is what defines you? And I use that structure to help people think about some of the things, what defines you, all right? And I use several stories. I use metaphors to get people thinking about where they are and where they want to be. What are some of the warning signs in life? Their personal story that I've woven into every single one of these chapters to help the reader challenge some of these limiting mindsets that we believe. So that's really what the book is about.
Right. And do you have a time frame for when it's going to be released?
I believe it's going to be coming out in the fall. I actually had a chat with a publisher this afternoon. They called me. We're going back and forth, but it's going through the process. So I'm thinking we should be maybe late fall, thereabout. It should be out.
Great, absolutely. Yeah, I'll add this to the show notes to make sure that when it's out, we'll stay in touch so I can link it to whatever it is sold.
Absolutely.
And any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Yes. One thing I want to end on, and this may be a little provocative, but is to have whoever is listening to be a little crazy about your dreams. And I say this again with a very brief story. People will be tired of my stories by the time this is over. But
that's great. I like stories.
Guglielmo Marconi was the man who invented the wireless radio. When he was a kid, he loved science and tech. He was tinkering with a lot of things, and he took such affinity to the science and techs that he came up with the idea to come up with an invention that will break away from, back in the day, it was a Morse code, right? That's how the ships and all these things were done. But he came up with an idea to invent a device that would transmit messages wirelessly. His own dad, who believed in Marconi's ability and genius, doubted him, didn't think this guy was going to amount to anything with this idea. But his mom, however, believed in him, and they kind of fueled or fanned the flames for him. His friends at the time, who heard Marconi's idea to invent a wireless radio, a wireless way of communicating, had him checked into a psychopathic hospital because they thought he was crazy. Crazy for coming up with an idea to invent a wireless communication device. It turns out that the friends who thought Marconi was crazy were the ones who ended up being wrong. Marconi ended up inventing this device, but then what was interesting, he's Italian, by the way, his own country of Italy didn't think much of that device. And so he left Italy and went to England, and it was the English who actually embraced this idea. I say this to challenge whoever's listening that you need to go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. Marconi was tolerated in his home country as an Italian, but they didn't see much of what he believed in. And so when the English started making a lot of noise about this device and they were putting it on that ships and all that, the Italians realized, oh, this guy is really up to something. So they sent Marconi to come back, and that was when they started taking him seriously. The device that he invented was one of the devices that helped the Titanic radio for help and ended up saving, a number of people. I say this to say that sometimes you have to be a little crazy about your dreams, right? Crazy in terms of being bold enough, to the point where when people are making fun of you or questioning things, if Marconi had given into the idea or thought that it was crazy, he had given into the ridicule and all of that, we wouldn't have all these devices we have today we call smartphones. So it probably may have been invented by someone else, but maybe in a different setting, right? But it takes us to be a little crazy to get to where you want to be in life. It takes you to be a little crazy about your dreams, about your ideas, about your thoughts to get you to where you want to be in life. So if there's someone listening, or watching this podcast, whatever idea, whatever thought you have, be a little crazy about it. You're going to have opposition. You're going to have people who are going to question you, who are going to try to throw a monkey wrench, as they say, into those ideas. But guard that idea. Go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. A lot of the people who've made great strides in life are the people who are crazy about the ideas, crazy enough to bring them into fruition.
Go where you are celebrated and not where you're tolerated. That's a very powerful way to wrap things up. Thank you, Fred. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast. And I appreciate you sharing some knowledge and insight on this. Thank you very much.
Anytime, Omar. The pleasure is mine. Thank you so much for inviting me.
That was my interview with Fred Gatty. You can find the show notes for this episode on my website at omarjang.com/session 29. One thing that stood out to me about what Fred said was that we should really try multiple times before we even think about giving up. There's a quote that is attributed to Michael Jordan where he talks about how he achieves success. In that quote, he says, "I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and I missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed." End quote. Now think about that for a second. Think about how powerful that is. Michael Jordan is highlighting how many times he failed in a game, and he's seen as one of the best players in the world when it comes to basketball. And those failures eventually led him to be one of the most successful players. So next time you fail at something, I want you to get up, suck it up, and try again, because your success may just be behind your next failure. Thank you for spending part of your time with me today. As always, I am humbled to have your attention. Please take the state of motivation and inspiration that you are feeling right now and take the first step towards getting rid of those behaviors that are getting in your way. You may have failed previously, but it doesn't mean that you are not worthy of living the life that you want. My love to you and your family, and may the sun shine bright on your path. Until next time, please stay safe and motivated. Goodbye.
Thank you for listening to the Motivational Voice Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe and rate it on iTunes. Get show notes and the latest blog posts at omarjang.com.